Hey, Amani, peace, family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. And today we're gonna have the full team with you today. Welcome back, Frank. Good to
I
have
think
you.
you muted though.
Oh, I'm muted. You can't hear me. Can't. You don't hear me. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay.
Peace, everyone. I think we're all discombobulated.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Had to switch devices. I don't know how. Y'all just let me know. I'm on my phone. Let me know if it looks all right on our channels. Yeah. So what I was saying is, peace, family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism and podcast and book club. We have the whole team with you today, so I'm excited about that. I'm Ikemba of the Public Relations Committee.
Wait, is that me? Because I can't hear you.
You can't hear us, Frank?
Oh, so maybe I was good before.
Can you hear
All right,
me?
so Frank is messed up. I'm gonna take him out for now.
Yeah, if I can go back.
Yeah, go ahead, Frank. You can start.
Yeah, because I plan to read from my phone. So thank you all for being here. I guess you can introduce yourself while I'm doing this.
Hey, this is Tierney. I am the steering committee chair for We Charge Colonialism. Excuse our technical difficulties.
Yes, and we're going to get started. Okay, so I can be heard. I'm good? Okay. Great. So I had to switch back to the device. But yeah, appreciate everyone for being here as usual. I want you to like and share this podcast as far wide as possible so we can get more and more people to jump into these discussions with us and these readings. We have this podcast every week in book club to discuss current events, things that are happening around the world as it pertains to African people, as it relates to the issue of colonialism, because all of the problems that we face, I'm sure if you turn the corner, colonialism is right there. It's important for us to realize that and do what's necessary so we can overturn that particular institution. Now, we also read different texts every week, and the texts that we read are usually relating to our experiences, also how it relates to colonialism. So, hence the name, We Charge Colonialism, because we understand that this institution is very pervasive. It's, the dominating institution that we're facing in our lives. So with that being said, we always start off with our weekly roundup, just so that you know where we're reading from. We're going to be reading from chapter 3 today. So we're starting at chapter 3, and that's page 115 in the PDF. I'm sorry, I don't have the textbook with me. I don't have the book with me today, but it's the start of chapter 3. So we're right on the first page. There should be a link for everyone. There should be access to a link. Let me rephrase that. There should be access to the book in the chat. So look for that link so you can have access to our book. So with that being said, we can start off with our weekly roundup. And I guess we'll start. I plan to start with Frank, but he's not.
Yeah, hopefully he come back quick. So I can start off. I did want to talk about an article I actually posted to We Charge Colonialism social media last week, and I thought it was a good topic for this week. So it was about the Black Lives Matter movement and how mayors are basically shifting their tone inside of the campaign, their campaigns for re-election. Now, I'm guessing these re-elections, some of them probably have already happened because there was a lot of elections last week. But essentially, they're shifting their tone. As we know, their tone shifted politically to one of, we have to do something about the police, or we have to do reforms and everything like that. But now it's going back to law and order. And if anyone doesn't know, the history in the United States of law and order rhetoric is essentially the history of the new manifestation of segregationist rhetoric that came following the civil rights movement. So it wasn't cool to say like African or Blacks, shouldn't be included. So instead, they had to find more palpable ways to appeal to the masses. And one way of doing that was saying like, oh, well, we just need law and order. But while they're saying we need law and order, they're flooding our communities with drugs and things that are guns and everything. Like people who lived through that time tell interesting stories. I remember my dad told me like, yeah, one time, like I was a kid, a teenager, and I just remember one of my friends like, oh, come over here. And like he opened his car and there's all these military assault weapons that like, no way. How do you get this inside of the hood? Like, how do you get access to these military weapons? So I believe, they're flooding not just crack, but flooding the inner cities with weapons as a way to kind of self-destruct. And so while they're doing this, they're putting the police inside of the neighborhoods and using rhetoric like law and order. Frank, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So we're talking about the shift and the swing back to law and order politics. So I'm just going to read briefly from an article. In fact, I'll even share my screen if I can do that. So the article says mayor candidates across the country are closing out their campaign pledges to restore law and order, a major setback for racial justice protesters who only a year ago thought they had permanently reshaped the debate on policing in America, which is, funny because I could have told y'all wasn't changing anything, but some people really buy into the moment and think that they were permanently ending the oppression of people through the police. And it says, as voters head to the polls Tuesday, local elections are dominated by discussions about safety and law enforcement amid a surge in violent crime. The tone of the debate, even in many liberal urban cities, highlights how major policing reforms have stalled. So it's an interesting article. I can actually put the link to it inside of the description if anyone wants to read the whole thing. But I just want to get you guys' thoughts on this because obviously, like I said, it's for people who don't study history. It's same with like the whole George Floyd protests that things were changing, and then like here we go right back to the same old politics in the United States of America. So, what are y'all's thoughts?
Hey, a few quick thoughts I will have. I'll just lay them out sort of like bullet points. One thing I was thinking about was how the response to the police murder of George Floyd and others, Breonna Taylor and others, now we can see that it was reactionary, right? Because where are we at now? Where are the people who are talking about, not saying that there's no one out there, but where's this movement to reshape policing in this country, right? And there was some, examples of people trying to do that, like in, I think Seattle, I think was one place that they like going all out. But the other point I wanted to make too is the police. The police are a problem because the police.
I think it can be cutting up.
Police are defending
There we go.
the system. Like they're not the root of the. You can hear me?
Yeah, you stopped for a second, but you're slowing down too. But you could try again.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
I'll probably switch my device. So what I was saying is the police aren't the root of the problem. They're there protecting or defending the actual root of the problem. They're defending the ruling class. They're defending the system. And so even this talk about police as if pouring more money into the police is going to solve the issues. What all you're doing is going to lock more people up, right? You're not necessarily solving issues of poverty by hiring more police. These are some of the things that, I was looking for. If we're going to take this money, let's do our best to bring as many people out of poverty, because economic conditions are the root of a lot of these problems that we're facing.
And while you're switching, we didn't get to have a proper talk with Frank, because you're back. Welcome back after a long time, away. I don't know if you want to say anything to our audience.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. I've been out for almost 2 months now because I was involved in a terrible car accident. I got hit twice. So I got hit from the back, and then I also pushed me onto the traffic lane, and then another car came from the front and kind of struck into me. So it was really, really bad, and I was bleeding from my nose, my mouth, and I even went into shock. I was rushed to the emergency room. So my neck, my back, everything was, very in pain. Even up to now, I'm still feeling pain in my back, but, things are much better now. I'm making, much progress. So I'm finally back.
Welcome back.
Welcome,
you can give your thoughts. I'm sorry, I don't know if Ikemba's ready, but I was saying you could give your thoughts on the article.
I'm just coming, so I'm going to take time to really pick up. I'm going to be a little bit, hesitant to speak because I'm not really I'm trying to pick up things. But like Brother Nkima said, most of the time we also blame the police, but like he clearly said, the police are just protecting the status quo, of the people, because at the end of the day, the individual and the police, we all goes to court and we meet the people that need to do the judgment. Because imagine the police to, we be in the court, or the police to also, get to court as we civilians also get to court. But the issue here is the system that the police protect. The system also protect the police, and that is why we see most of these things going on, because the police know that at the end of the day they are working for the system, and the system going to protect them. So Brother Nkrumah said it, and the system are the one we need to hold accountable, because I think at some point during the George Floyd incident, we saw activists that came out and they were saying defund the police, because our attention was actually focused on the police and these racist people and all of those things. But I think the system too, is there to kind of make not focus on the reality and focus on something that is not really the problem, because if the police were being held accountable, I don't think we would have been discussing some of these things. And the only time you see police being held accountable are, minority police officers, officers that look like me, so to speak. Those are the people that will be here accountable in some other way, that will face some jail time and thing. So the system, is the one actually, that have the problem.
Yeah, another point too, like with the police, I mean, you have to really question the sincerity of these people who think like the police are the answer to the problems that we have in our communities. Just the very fact that they're not, doing a better job of tackling homelessness, poverty, and all of these other issues that racism that is a result of the colonial system. You just see that these leaders, these mayors, all these people are in cahoots with the ruling class. But I just want to make that last point. Was there something else you wanted to say before we move to Frank, Terry?
Nope, I think we're short on time, so you go ahead.
Okay. So, Frank, it's been a long time since we heard you give a story, man. I was going to lead off the show with you, but you had some technical issues. But man, what's going on?
I think our next topic here will be talking about Liberia, Firestone. Some of our viewers or listeners don't really know, about Firestone. They just see maybe Firestone in the Western world, and they don't really know where the material of that product come from. So when you hear about Firestone, the material of Firestone mostly, come from Liberia, though, that tiny land and suffering land. There where this product come from. Like if you go to the dollar store, you see plastic cups, spoons and all of those things. The material come from Liberia, tires and all of those things. But here's the thing though, Firestone, have a horrible history in Liberia. Even right now, I'm doing some research, but it's not everything that we can say until we can put everything together. But the war that was in Liberia, Firestone have a major influence in it. Imagine there's a company that was in Liberia that leased the, I don't want to say lease, that had a land for 100 and let's say 99 years. But when the 99-year period was coming to an end, we found out that all kind of war and activities and chaos was coming in, were being created in the country. And most of these things, the problem of the imperialists is that in order to succeed, they have to create a narrative, create a chaos, and to capitalize on that chaos. And that was one typical example of Firestone. And Firestone, since being in Liberia, have never created any conducive environment for the Liberian people, for the workers, and all of those things. So what Firestone have been doing to the Liberian people, mainly they gave the Liberian people beggar rest. They have not increased their pay, even gave them good pay. They gave them beggar rest, and that's what they have been doing to our people since its funding. And what happened here is, in that they have not even created how they call it, an environment that will be suitable for the citizen. Air pollution, water pollution, even the citizens that live in our area, in our surrounding, their water have been damaged and all of those things. The air have been damaged and it's causing death. So, and they are also paying deaf ear to it. In fact, I have been doing some research about it. There's a research I found from the Library of Congress. At the end of the day, these people have the information, but they change the story and bring a narrative to us. So Firestone was the one that actually enslaved the people in Liberia. It was not the enslaved African that left from here, that they took from here and took them to Africa. Because in fact, history tells us that the people they took from here and they took to Africa, they trained those people militarily to protect the colony of Liberia, to protect that territory just in case the native people want to rise up. And history has proven to us that those people were trained, and the United States also used her military, her navy, to put fear into the people. So listen to this right here. So this is what Firestone have done right here. I'm about to read it. It says here that tensions between the government of Liberia and Firestone increased in the following years and eventually resulted in a major crisis over the inadequate supply of labor. Firestone, indeed. Initially, Firestone had estimated an investment of $100 million in the rubber plantation from an annual production of 200,000 tons of rubber, which would be about half of the world output. In order to reach those goals, Firestone expected to employ around 350,000 workers, which considered utterly unrealistic. Firestone estimated that Liberia had an indigenous labor supply that was almost, and with an estimated total population of 2 million. However, it will not be possible to utilize that total number of workers needed for the land. To meet demand, Firestone had to develop a system of forced labor, analogous to slavery, in order to meet the number of workers needed for the required labor force. So the enslaved African that they took from here did not enslave the Liberian people or the indigenous people they met down there, but they wrote the story and let the real story out, and then says to us that the people that left from here, the city that left from here, went in Liberia, they went enslaved, the people that they met there, they treated them this way, they did them this way, and that have been forced, and we have been carrying a narrative and creating confusion among ourselves, hating our own brothers and sisters that left from here, and telling them you people came and enslaved us, and this is not new. It was Firestone and the United States government that actually enslaved the people. The matter just how they enslaved or the African they brought in the diaspora and put them on laboring plantation and thing. They did the same thing down there. So Firestone, we are going after them, and they will pay for the damages that they have caused. We are digging the story, and that's why the last time one of my how to call it educational posts that I did on Facebook with the Liberian community, and I said Firestone should get what they can get right now, because once some of us get there, we're going to go after them. So that's the thing, and Firestone is involved in Liberia and all of those things. And right after the war, and they elected a female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, she went in and renewed the contract because the contract ended. And in 2005, she renewed the contract. So some of the chaos or the disturbances and the issue you see in Liberia, Firestone have been the cause, because the 99-year contract was ending, so they have to create another war in order to go back to renew the contract. Because in order for these Westerners to succeed in Africa, where they have their company, those nations have to be in the struggling situation.
Want to add something, Terry?
Yeah. As far as Firestone, and I'm happy you brought them up, Frank, because WCC, we're working with a number of other African-led organizations to formally lay out who are these corporations that are doing these types of things, who are these corporations that are oppressing us and are responsible for colonialism. And Firestone just so far is one of the quickest ones that came to mind when building the list, because Firestone, these cars that whenever we're driving around in our cars, we don't really think about what happens. Where did the materials come from that we are using? Firestone is very much the one who has been the driver of imperialism and colonialism inside of Liberia. So I'm happy that we're working to bring light to this, because we know that the oppressor will not obviously out themselves. And I think this also, again, it brings to mind that we have to understand how close the corporations are married with foreign policy. So we know, for example, Liberia was an American colony. They acted like Liberia was the first free African nation, or one of the few free African nations. But in reality, Liberia has always been very closely tied to the United States. It's literally been the U.S. proxy inside of the African continent. If they want to find a way to overthrow a government, they talk to their top officials inside of Liberia. If they want to find a way to co-opt the movement, they go to the neighboring Liberia to see okay, what can we do? So if we understand that simultaneously with this policy, you also have these corporations that are behind the scenes and in front of the scenes that are pushing these policies along with the government, then we'll start to identify that it's not so separate. Whenever we're talking about our oppressors, the capitalists and the policymakers are really together, meeting, talking, exchanging reports, coming up with ideas about how they're going to get the most profit out of our African nations.
Yeah, I think both of y'all made some powerful points. I do appreciate this story as well, because I'm always looking. As an organization, we're looking. You had raised that, Terry, but that's definitely a personal interest of mine as well. It's just look at these corporations or companies that are exploiting the African nation. Because when we talk about colonialism, it's almost like this thing that happened in the past, and that's over with. And so when we're able to draw those connections to colonialism, to neocolonialism today, I think it strengthens our argument when we're out here having these discussions with people. So moving to the next topic, last topic is the G20. And I actually did a video, I think it's posted on our page now.
I think it'll be in the newsletter, and then after the newsletter goes out, we'll publish it. Yeah.
Okay, so look for that. But yeah, I just want to talk briefly about the G20. I won't go too much into them, but I'll just say that they met May 30th, 31st. G20 is the group 20 that was established in 1998 or 99. They were created by the G7. And so I'm going to take it back to the G7 real quick, and so that we know G7 are those European imperialist nations, right? So United States, Britain, United States, Britain, France, so forth, right? The G20 has integrated some of the Asian nations into that group because of course after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the world became more open for capitalism, right? Because I'm just putting that out there as sort of the context. And so now that you have these other nations who are beginning to have some economic success, the Western nations see that it is important or is more valuable to bring them into these discussions. But these discussions that's being had isn't for the benefit of the masses of the people. It is for these particular nations. I will say that the heads of the states are definitely looking out for their nation's interests at the end of the day. But when we look at the G20 makeup, South Africa is the only country that's a member of the G20. And I think, I know part of a reason, a strong reason for that is because of their colonial history with the Dutch and the English. So with that being said, you have like 53, 54, depending on, West Sahara's recognized, but, you have that many countries who are not at the table having this discussion on the future of the world. The G20 makes up 60% of the world's population, which is a result of India and China. But I'll just leave it here for the sake of time and just say that I think it's important that we see these or keep up with these conferences and these groups from the colonial powers when they come together and they're making decisions that's going to impact our lives. They're talking about 70% of the world's population to be vaccinated by April 2022, somewhere around that time, but sometime during 2022. The previous year, they were talking about HIV and AIDS. They're sitting back and they're just talking about a lot of these problems they're talking about. They're really the source of all of these problems at the end of the day. And so I think it will behoove us, or it's incumbent upon us to come together that are part of the colonized community and have our discussions on how we're going to govern this world. It's more of us than them at the end of the day.
I mean, so when you posted that inside of our group chat, the 70% of the world colonized by, what is it, 20?
You're talking about the trade? What stat you talking about?
No, the stat. I mean, if you posted it in a group chat, they're trying to get 70% of the world.
Oh yeah, population vaccinated. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what their goal is, but when you posted that, I mean, it does make your ears go up, because it's like, first of all, as Hikema pointed out, why are these people feeling like they're in a position, a small amount of the world, 20 nations, and no way representative of most of the world? I think there were only 3 African countries even there, South Africa, and then Rwanda and Congo were represented. And making decisions for the entire world, it does make your ears go up, especially because we should understand that the vaccine colonialism issue is very real. Particularly, there's only a couple of companies that are given access to the world, really, particularly ones in America. And then also on top of that, they're trying to use their vaccines, each individual country, use their vaccines as kind of like leverage to say, oh, you have to take our vaccine if you want to come into our country, or we don't recognize this vaccine. Cuba, which has had, I don't know if y'all know, Cuba has a vaccine that's actually has a bigger success rate than both Pfizer and Moderna. The World Health Organization has refused to approve that vaccine, and citing some broad, or some abstract reason why. So we can kind of see like what's happening right now. And I don't know how y'all feel about the specific vaccines. Me personally, like I don't know how anyone could argue that all Africa should feel comfortable with something that's being manufactured exclusively by their enemies. But I do feel that we have to take more of an active role in our own politics, in our own destinies and our own self-determination, especially understanding the difference in how COVID did affect Africa versus Europe. We should understand this is our chance and our opportunity to take more control and to try to figure out our own solutions instead of relying on the West to come in and push their own policies inside of our countries. And I did want us to answer Brother Kofi's question about defining capitalism, if I could do that real quick. But just the very simple definition for capitalism is a system where the means of production, meaning anything that goes into making your cell phone, making your computer, making your house. So that would be natural materials. That would be the factories. All those things will be owned by individuals as opposed to being owned collectively. So that's the simple definition of capitalism.
Yeah, Frank, you wanted to add anything before we transition?
I wanted to talk about the how they call it, the meeting they just had in UK about the climate change, but I will talk about that later. But let me just explain a little bit to what Tiani said about capitalism. Now, she just defined it. So who are the capitalists? The capitalists are those that make decisions. You can even have the resources as long you cannot make decisions about your resources. As long you cannot produce, you don't have any aspect of producing your resources, you are not part of the capitalists. So those that make decisions as well, those are, how to call it, do the distribution, those that control the resources, they are the capitalists. So no African nation or Africa as a whole is not part of the capitalist institution. So you can go to Europe, as an African person, you can go to China, you buy your businesses in bulk and whatsoever, and you take it to Africa or to your various nation in Africa, and you sell and you come back and you fly and you think you are part of the capital institution. No, you are just finishing. You are a finished product. You are just finishing the product that are being made by the capitalists. So you go and finish the product. So you selling it, you are not part of it. You are just making a living out of what you need to do to live.
And there's the little difference though. Like I would put it more so like there are definitely Africans who owned privately like the means of production, so that would be capitalist. But one thing when I was in Ghana, when I was talking, I was actually had a meeting with a few members from the AAPRP there, and one thing that the way that the one brother put it was that here, if you are African and you have that type of ownership, you went through there's no way, you absolutely went through a European institution or some European connection. Like you don't get vast lands and vast access to mines and stuff like that on your own. So as Frank said, it's like these are people who they're not moving individually. They're part of the capitalist class only by their relationship to European powers. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Indeed, you know, and these, you know, talk about capitalism, that can last for hours. I'm over here just thinking like, but there's certain characteristics. The one thing I like to tell, you know, emphasize when speaking to people, because I've had conversation with Africans in the diaspora about capitalism and, you know, the use of capitalism and how it's always been around. One of the things that we have to understand is that when we say capitalism, we not just talk, we understand that markets have always existed. You talked about ownership, right? Property ownership. These are characteristics of capitalism. But I think like the important aspect of this type of capitalism has that colonial aspect to it as well. So we're dealing with colonial capitalism. And also it's capital based. Like we never had a society where it was a capital-based society. But I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but you know, there's just certain characteristics about colonial capitalism that has never existed. With that being said, we're going to get into the book. Maybe we can talk about it more with the reading too. Pretty sure Walter Rodney's going to touch on capitalism. But I want to encourage people, again, like and share. Amani Na Asabuhi. Revolutionary greetings. I see y'all in the chat. But yeah, like and share. Also, I want to always encourage people to email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org. Find out how you can get involved and become a member. Also, check out our website, wechargecolonialism.org. and we are on all social media platforms. Well, the ones I know about: Twitter, IG, Facebook. I know they be creating stuff, but I'm only hip to those. But yeah.
You're right.
So we're going to transition, like I said, at the top of the hour, chapter 3, the very first page of chapter 3. And it's 115 in the text. I'm sorry, 115 in the PDF. Frank, maybe you can tell us, you're looking at the book, right? What page are we in the book? Yeah, what page are we? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, page 75.
75?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's get right into it. So chapter 3, Africa's contribution to European capitalist development, the pre-colonial period. British trade is a magnificent superstructure of American commerce and naval power on the African foundation. Malachi Paslet. Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm not even going to do it. If any of y'all know, I'll let y'all. But the African trade, the great pillar in support of the British plantation trade in North America, 1745. If you were to lose each year more than 200 million livres, then you now get from your colonies, if you had not the exclusive trade with your colonies, two Fijian manufacturers, typo here, to maintain your navy, to keep your agriculture going, to repay for your imports, to provide for your luxury needs, to advantageously balance your trade with Europe and Asia, then I say it clearly, the kingdom would be irretrievably lost. Bishop Maury of France, argument against France's ending the slave trade and giving freedom to its slave colonies, presented in the French National Assembly. Maybe we could touch on that. But how Europe became the dominant section of a worldwide trade system. Because of the superficiality of many of the approaches to underdevelopment, and because of resulting misconceptions, it is necessary to re-emphasize that development and underdevelopment are not only comparative terms, but that they also have a dialectical relationship one to the other. That is to say, the two help produce each other by interaction. Western Europe and Africa had a relationship which ensured the transfer of wealth from Africa to Europe. The transfer was possible only after trade became truly international, and that takes one back to the late 15th century, when Africa and Europe were drawn into common relations for the first time. Along with Asia and the Americas, the developed and underdeveloped parts of the present capitalist section of the world have been in continuous contact 4.5 centuries. The contention here is that over that period, Africa helped to develop Western Europe in the same proportion as Western Europe helped to underdevelop Africa. The first significant thing about the internationalization of trade in the 15th century was that Europeans took the initiative and went to other parts of the world. No Chinese boats reached Europe, and if any African canoes reached the Americas, as is sometimes maintained, they did not establish two-way links. What was called international trade was nothing but the extension overseas of European interests. The strategy behind international trade and the production that supported it was firmly in European hands, and specifically in the hands of the seagoing nations from the North Sea to the Mediterranean. They owned and directed the great majority of the world's seagoing vessels, and they controlled the financing of trade between 4 continents. Africans a little clue as to the tricontinental link between Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Europe has monopoly of knowledge about the international exchange system seen as a whole, for Western Europe was the only sector capable of viewing the system as a whole. You want to discuss before I keep going?
I think I would like to discuss the dialectical relationship between Europe and Africa and other parts of the world, because to me that's something that is missing from a lot of the discourse about, oh, we need development. And because Europe is kind of put on a pedestal and America is put on a pedestal of the development that Africans are seeking, they're not relating the fact that that type of development inside of that short amount of time was only a result of the pillaging of other parts of the world and also enslaved enslaved labor. You know, America would not have been able to build up all these things without slave labor. Europe was using slave labor. Don't think that, I mean, it wasn't as deep as in America as far as actually in Europe. But if you understand that the plantations that were owned by the major European powers, whether it was the English or who owned a lot of the Caribbean nations, and the Spanish who were owning almost all of the Hispanic nations, Portugal, that has a direct relationship to their development. So whenever I hear Africans trying to imagine development as some type of self-sustaining force that it was for the West, I want to ask them, so who are you going to enslave to get that type of development? Who are you going to pillage? And if you're talking of, and we have a real life example of that, because Rwanda, Paul Kagame, they're very developed, but they didn't get that from within. They got that from pillaging places like the Congo. Mm-hmm. So whenever we're talking about development, we have to understand, like, to me, again, I think the whole idea of development has to be reconstructed for something that's authentically African. We adopt European terms with their meanings. And to me, when I think about development as far as Africa, it cannot be something that comes at the cost of human life and uses slave labor and manipulates other Africans or even just any indigenous person as a way to try to elevate one segment of a society.
Indeed. Frank, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I will go with Tiani, and I'll also look at the aspect where he spoke about the internationalization between Europe and Africa and so forth. I mean, these are words, you know, that are being used, but in reality, it doesn't really apply to us. We do not need internationalization with the Western world in order for Africa to succeed, or in order for Black nations to succeed, or in order for African people to succeed. And I think what he's also trying to say is, in this part of the book or the reading, is that this war exists, but we can never, you know, be an international partner to these people, and we think we want to succeed. What's going to happen here is, as much as we might try, they will only accept us if we remain the underdog. They have to take the lead and we follow. And that means we have to accept what they say. We have to accept what they bring to us. We cannot be on a table forth with them and give them decision. They're not waiting to listen to us. So he's trying to tell us here that if globalization was actually going to work, if Europe benefit from Africa, or the European nation have benefited from Africa through this global exchange, but Africa have never gotten anything from Europe through this global exchange. So it will never work. For example, and this is when I'm going to go into it. Recently, right, we just saw African leaders going to England to have, you know, a meeting about the war, you know, about the climate change or the effect of climate or pollution and all of those things. I mean, that was great. You know, African leaders went there and African representatives went there. They gave great speeches and all of those things. And the Ghanaian president, you know, and there was a child, you know, a little girl from Kenya, and she also gave a great speech as well, you know, begging European people that they should look into their heart, they should do this and all of those things. Look, folks, the effect of climate was never caused, or are not being caused by African, are being caused by the European people, are being caused by the Caucasian. So first of all, by them calling us to have meeting with them, they're not really listening to us. What they're doing to us is that in order to actually know how to deal with your enemies or your subordinate, you have to bring them closer to understand their mind, their intention, and then you will know how to deal with them. Let me tell you something. All those European leaders, even America, Joe Biden, they all were sitting there. They wasn't there because they wanted for African to be there. They wanted to see how brave we are. They wanted to see our intention. They wanted to see the lead we're about to take. And after that, let me tell you something. These people, they will not go into their separate meeting to actually have the meeting and then read those videos and then look at those videos and see African intention and then come out with their next plan. They were not ready there to listen to African and team. No, we gave those speeches and team and we left, right? And what went behind the scene also was to bribe some of those African leaders, because we're talking about African unity. You cannot be talking about African unity and you have a meeting with these people. So they called in there. They were all doing things behind the scene, bribing them, giving them money at the end of the day. And then when they come back, most of those leaders, you will never see them talking about African unity again, because they are being bribed into those meetings and so forth. That is why it is. So I think we should be discussing, if we want to discuss climate change, we should discuss it on the continent of Africa. African leaders should come together. African representatives should come together. Those who have knowledge, they should come together and discuss about climate change on the African continent, and not coming to a European nation and West. It's not going to help us.
There we go. Hey, appreciate both of those points. Like, as y'all was talking, as you were talking, Tierney, a statement had came up that I can't recall who put it up there, but it was Walter Rodney didn't understand the difference between mercantilism and capitalism. And I was wondering, I know it's a chat. If you feel like you can't type all of that up in the chat, it's too much to explain. Don't. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, because I haven't examined this text deep enough to unite with that. But I'm not saying that's not true. I guess, like, the thing that I'm trying to figure out is, like, is there something flawed about what he's saying as a result of that? I'm just interested in, that's just the curiosity in me, because even when you understand that mercantilism, it's still capitalism with just more of a focus on the mother country, right? And so even with the scramble for Africa, you sort of have that mercantilism philosophy that's driving these European powers to colonize and have their sections in Africa and so forth. But I still feel like at the end of the day, it's still like colonial capitalism. There's a difference, but I'm just wondering if there's something in the text that is making the argument flawed, or a particular argument being made flawed.
Yeah, because I don't see where that, if that's true, and I don't know that it is, I don't see where that would change any of the message. But mercantilism is more focused on maritime trading, whereas capitalism, capitalism is the manifestation of what they were trying to achieve with mercantilism. But again, I think we have to keep in mind, just based on definitions, you either have a system where the means of production are owned by a few, or they're owned by a lot. So if you can give me an alternative other than a few or the few or the lot, you can write that out. But I think that's the key as to what Walter Rodney is reflecting. But I didn't want to say, someone said, pray for Ethiopia. And yes, please, y'all pray for Ethiopia, because a country that has a huge history inside of being in our liberation struggle could possibly be facing, something very serious that we know, well, I believe is being sponsored by the United States government. So please pray for Ethiopia.
All right, right on. Yeah, and the other part, you flushed it out, like with the dialectic, that stood out to me. And also, last point as well, is Huey P. Newton. I always like to bring him up when we're talking about defining phenomena, because he said that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. And I think, like, even when we're having these discussions on what capitalism is, we have to be clear and make a distinction. And we have to be the ones who are saying, no, this is what capitalism is. You know what I'm saying? And not go by some sort of like textbook European definition of capitalism. Our experience and how capitalism is operated in regards to African people. So I think we can do one paragraph, maybe two. Let's see. Europeans used the superiority of their ships and cannon to gain control of all the world's waterways, starting with the Western Mediterranean and the Atlantic coast of North Africa. From 1415, when the Portuguese captured Ceuta near Gibraltar. They maintained the offensive against the Maghreb. Within the next 60 years, they seized ports such as Arzila, El Sar Es Sigha, and Tangier. I'm probably butchering all of that right there. And fortified them. By the second half of the 15th century, the Portuguese controlled the Atlantic coast of Morocco and used its economic and strategic advantages to prepare for further navigations, which eventually carried their ships around the Cape of Good Hope in 1495. After reaching the Indian Ocean, the Portuguese sought with some success to replace Arabs as the merchants who tied East Africa to India and the rest of Asia. The 17th and 18th centuries, the Portuguese carried most of the East African ivory, which was marketed in India, while Indian cloth and beads were sold in East and West Africa by the Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French. The same applied to cowrie shells from the East Indies. Therefore, by control of the seas, Europe took the first step towards transforming the several parts of Africa and Asia into economic satellites. Do one more. When Portuguese and the Spanish were still in command of a major sector of world trade in the first half of the 17th century, they engaged in buying cotton cloth in India to exchange for slaves in Africa to mine gold in Central and South America. Part of the gold in the Americas would then be used to purchase spices and silks from the Far East. The concept of metropole independency automatically came into existence when parts of Africa were caught up in the web of international commerce. On the one hand, there were the European countries who decided on the role to be played by the African economy. And on the other hand, Africa formed an extension to the European capitalist market. As far as foreign trade was concerned, Africa was dependent on what Europeans were prepared to buy and sell. All right. So I'm gonna stop it there. We got a few minutes left. This particular part, I just appreciate him laying out the history. I know it's like really this is like a general history. He's not going deep into details, but he is talking about this environment in Europe in the 14th century, going into the 15th, 16th century. But when you look at what's developing at that particular time with trade, and the Europeans really having to go to the Americas and go to Africa. Actually, like when they're discovering, not discovering, I didn't mean to say that, when they make contact with the Taino people or encounter those people in the Americas, there's Africa, most of Africa is a new discovery for them as well. You stop saying discovery, but it's the first time that they've been to Africa just as well as the Americas. So all of this is happening as a result of the conflicts that's taking place with the Moors and all of that. But, I always appreciate the history because it gives us context and understanding of how we got here.
Yeah, since we have a few minutes, could we answer, I'll go look for this question that Ms. Hattie put up. This one. It says, obviously, we will not enslave and oppress our people. Then what is our answer to a sustainable economic system? To me, I think it goes back to, first of all, the issue of definition. So if you go back to what sustainable economic system is, I think we have to completely decolonize our notion of what that is. Meaning we can't allow people who we don't agree with their economics to tell us what a sustainable economy is. So if America is your prototype, if the UK is your prototype, if France is your prototype, any of these countries, if they're a prototype for what a sustainable and economic system is, those countries which have had the biggest role in African enslavement, then we have to change from what they're saying and look to something that's more authentically good for Africa. And I think you can get that from studying pre-colonial Africa, understanding that we had systems that worked fine for us, but also we can't get stuck in the past. I think some people want to recreate exactly like the exact systems that existed back then. The reason why I presented it for myself as a scientific socialist is because it's not just to say, okay, we go back to the communal life that we lived before. We understand that we're in an industrialized world, an industrialized economy, and we understand now who our enemies are, that our enemies want to come in and take over our country. So every single type of policy, even as we're adopting our historic African traditions, we have to adapt it to the times we're in. We're in an industrialized economy. Our ancestors did not live in an industrialized economy. So that means that we have to find ways to be able to care for ourselves and also protect ourselves. And you can't protect yourself, unfortunately, in this world without having certain lines of defense that they didn't have to have back then. So to me, though, the spirit is communalism, which is really socialism. Some people prefer the word communalism because they have a stigma towards the word socialism, but it's literally the same thing. In fact, Kwame Ture said that socialism is just African communalism applied to an modern industrialized economy. So it's the same principles. And I think that those principles, whenever you see them being used, whether it's countries like Cuba, Vietnam, Venezuela, you have a different understanding of what a flourishable economic system is. It's one where the people are not sick and hungry while you have a few people building these huge, beautiful buildings. It's ones where the people can get educated and take care of their family with and maybe not have these huge railway systems, or at least not as quickly as they might be able to build inside of another type of economy.
Right on. Frank, you had any last words to add on to that?
Yeah, just quickly, like Tiani, how to call it, summarize it, she explained it in depth. So I'm just going to add to it. And, for example, you cannot go to a system that exploits you and you expect the system to give you the definition of exploitation. It will never work. Your definition of exploitation will always be different from the definition of exploitation from the man who exploits you. So that's just how it is. So if you want to know the meaning of exploitation, you have to define it in your own perspective as it applies to you. Because the person that does it to you, he doesn't know how really it is, how people feel. You see it? So you know how you feel when somebody exploits you. So you have to find your definition, your meaning, and so forth. Now, I was watching a video from Karma where he asked a question. There was how do you call it? A guy that asked Karma a question about capitalism. And then Karma told him, okay, listen. And he couldn't, he was trying to be a little bit stubborn. So Karma was like, if you were enslaved and your freedom was to come about you killing me, what will you do? And right there he was like, I give up, because there was nothing he could do. And that was the perfect answer. If you are enslaved and your freedom only means to kill me, what will you do? And he said to Karma, Kwame Ture, that said, I agree with you. And he walked away. And Kwame Ture said, you see, that's what exactly. So in order to have a policy, if you want to have a policy, you cannot go to the men that enslave you. You cannot go to the men that exploit you. You cannot be going to Europe and things and you finding the European policy. What you're going to do here is you're going to build your policy on a system of colonialism, on a system of exploitation, and then exploit your own people.
I was listening to you tell the story. I'm like, man, this sounds just like Kwame Ture, but he's saying Karl Marx.
Yeah, Kwame Ture. I mean, it's Karl Marx, but yes, Karma, like just short. Yeah.
Hey, right on. See, great quote in the chat. It says, going forward, perhaps we benefit more by discussing Ubuntu applications to economic uplift as opposed to capitalism. Debunk. Ubuntu focus is positive energy, while cap critique may not be. Yeah, I think we always gotta, we gotta expose the contradictions, but I agree, like we have to definitely build an alternative and talk about alternatives simultaneously. It's a thing in the Gods and Earths, we say build and destroy, right? In the nation Gods and Earths. Yeah, so that's something that we need to do. And I think that's a personal critique I was having when I first came into the movement, is that I was seeing a lot of organizations doing a whole lot of critiquing and waging revolution. But I was like, hold on, but when it happens, like, where's the alternative though? So I think like these are two things that we have to be organizing on both fronts to make sure, we don't just have chaos. Because that's the thing too. What is it going to? That's a whole nother story. I ain't got time. Tierney, you wanted to say something? Go ahead, because I'm.
Oh, I mean, no, I was thinking in my head, but yeah, and I see that. I think me personally, I felt like, so for example, our organization's called We Charge Colonialism as opposed to like Ubuntu, you know, something that is definitely has positive energy. But I think every day about colonialism. I think every day about the exploitation of Africans, because I understand that we have to bring it to an immediate end. But to Baruti's point, I think one thing that you see often is that a lot of people focus on the problem without having solutions. And we've seen repeatedly a lot of people who like will push a certain leader out of power, but not have an organizational structure set up to supplant that. And that to me is like open space for outsiders to come in and impose their plans, because they already have it planned out. How the African economy and African government that will work for the West is already planned out. They already have it planned to a T, and they know it works because it's happened over and over again. So I do think there has to be more emphasis on what are we doing whenever we do get rid of capitalism and get rid of the exploitation of Africans inside of our countries.
Yeah, right on. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to keep that Ubuntu in mind. I actually have a book at home that I just picked up. I actually purchased it to as a book that I was going to sell among others, but I decided, I was like, I want to keep this book. Yeah, so I think that's something that we can definitely be more mindful of in these discussions too. Talking about those African philosophies, alternatives to the social system that we have now. Excuse me. But with that being said, though, it's 11:01, and I want to appreciate you all for being a part of this hour of discussion, reading. We will be back here next week at 10 a.m. to continue to dive into this text, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. So please come back, and don't forget to share, like and share this podcast so we can have more and more people be a part of these discussions until we get free. Then we can switch the discussion up a little bit. All right, y'all.
Peace, everyone.